Stephen, it's so good to have you with us.
Yes.
And we want to talk a little about the play. Kieran, tell us about the play.
Well, the youthful adventures of Damon Dukirk goes back a long way. It's really it's an 8-part episodic monologue about a peripatetic poet who at 33 feels that he's completely washed up, and he revives somewhat in an obscure German town, and then goes on some very hectic, catastrophic, mad adventures in the name of kind of art and indulgence and maybe even women finding at certain points. So it's kind of a very literary monologue, which hopefully people will find very, very funny. And it goes back a long way. The first part of it was actually written almost 20 years ago, and I would write just kind of one episode a year. And so small parts of it would get performed in Australia. And I had the whole thing really by about 2009, 2010. And so some parts of it were being performed in Australia. And then by about 2015, I started sending it to America. And a New York artist by the name of Alison Plamondon put me in touch with Zach. And Zach started performing parts 1 and 2 really at some small New York festivals around 2015 and 2016. And then Zach and Stephen had worked closely together on other productions. And so it was great to bring Stephen in as a director. And in more recent times, the play, we did the March International Solo Festival through the pandemic in 2020, and then it did the One Festival in New York last year, but it's only ever it's never gone past part 3. And I'm really excited about the SaraSolo Festival because we're going to get the full Dukirk after all this time. It's going all the way. And, it's a long way from Melbourne, Australia.
I love it.
Sarasota, Florida. Pity I wasn't in Melbourne, Florida. That would have been good.
That would
Really.
Yeah, but I'm really excited to finally see the work have a full production, and Stephen and Zach do a really, really wonderful job with it, and they're very, very sensitive.
Where did the idea come from?
Look, I think the idea was there's some autobiography there in terms of the not so much the situational aspects that develop in the play, but more the fact that in my 20s, I didn't write plays at all. I was actually, I just wrote poems really, and I got a reasonable way. But I got to about 30 and I kind of hit a brick wall with poetry, and I couldn't quite explain it. And then as a sort of a way out of how do I keep writing, I thought I'll try some monologues. So I did have this feeling in my early 30s that I was kind of washed up and sort of semi-retired. So the first part of it has that kind of feeling, but then it kind of goes into much more sort of fantastical, picaresque.
This is what I love about the characterization, because it feels like we should know him. It feels like in the literary world, because I think that you must borrow from your own, what is probably distinctive personality, because he's wonderfully funny and wonderfully cagey, wonderfully his perspective on life seems to be that kind of, I'll get through it and let me do this and what's going on here. To me, it's what endeared me to what I got to read the first time was it's sort of candid nature, his way of going through everything, and his response, and maybe, and yeah, just his character. So I'm assuring you that it reads so beautifully, delightfully in that way. I have a question, Stephen. I have a question for you about directing solo. We always talk about this with all of our audiences, for years, because we have had to train audiences in a way, or at least educate them into how to see a solo work, because the audience is very exceptional in that sense. They can't really sit back. But we also, since Annie and I both direct solo, we find it fascinating what directors talk about when they're dealing with a solo piece.
Just one person. Yeah.
What is that like for you?
Yeah, that's a important question to answer if you're working on a one-person show, I think. So on one hand, like I could say that everything I would answer that we talk about and work on are the same to-do list that you have in a more full production. But I think, and in particular, like rhythm and dynamism are the two things that are, of course, those matter, no matter if you've got a huge ensemble musical or a one-person show. The difference is merely that, like, your deck of cards is a lot smaller. In fact, you just have the one card for a one-person show. So finding ways to make the work dynamic and feel like it's got rhythm and color without it's going into sort of stagey tropes is probably the biggest challenge, because I think that a lot of us, our first instincts for how do I keep this dynamic, how do I keep it interesting, is like, ooh, just walk down stage center and there you are. But, I think even an audience untrained knows when something's inauthentic in that way. So that's a lot of the conversation. But then the flip side of that is also just remembering that sometimes the text is doing it for you. And one of the reasons people enjoy one-person shows, or don't, quite frankly, is because, like, you do, as you say, like, have to listen more, right? You do have to lean forward. And if you're not listening, like, there's only so much you can do with one instrument. So sometimes it's a reminder of, like, oh, maybe we don't have to be dynamic, and maybe we should lean into the reality that this is not just about the text, but that the text is going to do that for us. So just always playing that line and deciding, like, is it interesting? Is it interesting? Is it changing for the audience? The difficulty is that it just gets hard when you hear that long piece of text 4 times in a row to try to get out of yourself and be like, wait, what is the first time audience going to see? It's a lot easier with a lot of people on stage because panache is easier to notice when you have some good blocking. So that's sort of the challenge, I'd say.
Someone who also performs a lot of solo and then also directs it. For me, the audience is your other character. So I think that's why it's hard for an audience. All of a sudden the audience realize, oh, I'm in the play. Somehow I'm in the play in some way. And now I have to work. And for a lot of us, that's delicious fun. And some people, it takes them off guard. But they're your other character in some way, even with a fourth wall up. So I find that interesting and fun. Yeah. Tell me about working on this particular play and discovering this character.
Yeah, sure. Well, we've had the benefit, as Kieran said, of getting to work on it over time, and I get along famously with Zach, so we have a lot of fun working on it together. Well, first of all, it's just fun. The sort of fantasy world of where like people care about the poet is really fun for us. We love the sort of optimism of like poetry's going to change the world, which is Kieran's, which I think is one thing I love about Dukirk. What I really like about, I think Candide, like you mentioned, is really interesting comparison, both because it's so picaresque, as Kieran said, Dukirk moves to different places, but like, if we were to use that, I forget who the sort of cynic in Candide is, but Dukirk is both Candide himself, the pure innocent, and he's the cynic. And as artists, I think we understand, like, oh, this guy seems like he's a miserable SOB. Oh, but boy, he's actually just got a bleeding heart and wants to be loved. And those two sides of him are both so strong that it's just really fun to modulate that and figure out when are you going to be like a mean fella and when are you going to be the sweet fella, and those switch a lot in the play, or there's potential for finding a lot of that change. So we have a lot of fun sort of navigating that, both having fun with the text and what entertains us in that regard.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
Oh,
Okay. I can't wait to meet Zach. I hope we get a chance to have an interview with him, because he sounds delightful.
I think he'd like that, and that would be great if you're able to do that. Yeah, because Dukirk's caught between a real sense of youthful idealism, but also he gets caught by being hedonistic, and it's that kind of thing, I think, now, which I can only see retrospectively, and I couldn't have maybe talked about this when I wrote some of it, is that it's kind of like that artist who eventually straightens up. And what I mean by that is, if you took someone like Nick Cave, who produced a hell of a lot of work, drug affected through the 80s, and then eventually, not that Dukirk's in any way into the hard drug thing, but it's like they get a lot of work done, but then it kind of sort of straightens up into a more careerist, orderly slant. And I think ultimately we're kind of left with this idea with Dukirk that he will continue on, and it will eventually kind of straighten up, but not right away. maybe in his 40s and 50s.
It's time.
It's time. Yeah. Thanks
Be
a
well,
lot,
y'all.
Steve.
Good night.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, Zach, how are you?
Hey, Zach.
Good. How are you?
It's really good to see you. So you're going to come
Good
down
to see you guys.
You're going to come down to Sarasota and do a little skit for us.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So tell us how you got involved with this wonderful play.
A friend of mine recommended me to, an actor friend of mine recommended me to Kieran, who was looking for somebody to do his one-man play about a disenchanted poet who attempts to travel around the globe, spreading his good word and his work around the underground poetry scene. And so I did this. I don't even remember. It was so many years ago when we did the first incarnation of it, and Kieran has been adding on to it since then.
Excellent. Yeah, because
And we brought Stephen the director on. We brought Stephen the director on about the second or third time we did the show.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
And now you're going to get a chance to do the entire piece for the first time.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. Yeah.
We're calling this a world premiere.
Oh, it's a weird feel. Okay, good.
So tell us a little bit about the play without giving it away too much.
Oh, well, the play, it follows a series of moments in Damon Dukirk's life in which he is disenchanted by his lack of success as a poet, and keeps trudging along, and circumstances change, and he goes on a kind of wild adventure throughout Europe and the rest of the globe, doing workshops and readings, and having somewhat irresponsible adventures with the people that he runs into.
I love the character. And as an actor, when I read what I did of the script, I think Kieran gave us the full thing at first. It's so actable and just so much. It's so bizarre and wonderful. And I was describing when we were talking to Kieran and Stephen that it's a bit Candide-like, that he, and I love how he finds himself in circumstances, and often a fish out of water, often on the almost on the sidelines, but totally involved, and I think it's a wonderful adventure, and it's a wonderful following of this guy, and the beauty of it, partially because it's poetic, but also because of Kieran's remarkable poetic writing. it's gorgeous to hear, and it's just beautiful words. In all their splendor. I mean, and we're not talking about real pretty words all the time either. So, you mentioned that you brought Stephen on a little after having done, because you did the first two parts like here and there and different. And I think it was like early teens, wasn't it? In 2014 or something, maybe. I don't know. I don't know your history better than you do at all. But we talk to often talk to teams, creative teams, about the importance of a director, especially on a solo piece, and the importance of a director who you as a performer trust beautifully, because it's a very vulnerable place to be, even more so than a multicast play, I think. And this isn't autobiographical, although it borrows from Kieran's life, but not yours. So there is that removal. But how did anything change when when Stephen came on? When Stephen came on, how did that change?
Stephen was able to amplify some of the staging and some of the ideas and make sure that certain a point of view was expressed where it may not have been without Stephen. And he's a phenomenal director and really brings a level of professionalism to the work that is hard to come by. So it's very enjoyable to work with Stephen. And
do you enjoy doing solo theater?
It's something. This is the first time I've ever done a solo show, so I've enjoyed it. Yeah, it's fun. It's a completely different challenge, because it's just, it's truly just you and the and who you're talking to,
and the audience.
You're getting very little from them, and when you rehearse it so much on your own, you really have no idea how it's going to be received. So any reaction that you get is pretty remarkable,
because they are the other character. They are that other being,
which is what I love solo. I love solo theater.
We talk about it as walking a tightrope, because that was my first experience. I had done a couple things when I was a lot younger in New York, but the first solo play I did in this time, it was a play Annie wrote, and to me it was like getting on the tightrope, and it had to start, and I was the only one.
And I feel like doing solo, because I love doing solo plays. You have such an interesting relationship with your audience that when I'm in a play with other people, I feel like I'm a better actor. I don't know how to explain why. So thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait for you to get down here.
Really look forward to you being here.